So me and Brad went to the pre-release. We're about to talk about my sealed pool. I got kind of lucky. It's decent. It's not like the world's best pool, but it's good. And Brad's. We're going to talk about Brad's first, which isn't displayed here.
Yeah, it was a pretty terrible ramp deck.
And the thing about it was, Brad didn't get really unlucky. He just didn't get all the pieces. He had the top end. He had a lot of really good big stuff. What was some of the big stuff you had?
So I had an Ulamog, and I had a couple of the, 10-8s or whatever they were, for 8 mana.
Oh, the Breaker of Armies?
I think, no, it was the one with Vigilance, maybe. No, it was the Breaker.
Okay.
It wasn't the Breaker of Armies, because they didn't have to block it.
All right, well,
It was one of the 8 mana ones.
He had a couple of the big, decent ones. He had a good top end. The real issue was he only had, 4 pieces of ramp.
Yeah, it was 4 pieces of ramp, I think.
And some stuff in the middle. The real issue is, for that deck to be really good, for him to have a deck that's probably going to win some good prizes or get to a good rate, you probably need 6 to 8 pieces of ramp.
Yeah, I needed a few more pieces. If I had some of the better ones, too, I would have probably won. The one that taps for 2 mana. Do you have one of those? No, I don't think you do.
I do. The 5 mana one that taps for 2
yeah,
Channeler. Yeah, and
I only had one of those.
Yeah. And the early pieces were the essential part.
Yeah.
Now,
I did have one of these guys, and I had a couple of the put a land into play, tapped it instant
and you had
speed.
a Eyeless Watcher, right? The 4 mana guy that makes 2 dudes, and he's a 1/1.
Oh, yeah. I had that guy.
But
so I had almost enough.
Yeah, the thing is, 4 is not quite 6, and 6 is really where you start getting the point of being playable. Now, when playing, I did see some other people running that deck, the same kind as Brad. I've got big targets, maybe the game will go long, but I might not necessarily. The deck that I was running, I was very happy with. I did have a couple of ramp things. You guys see the Lifespring Druid here, the Eldrazi Sky Spawner, which is one of the best cards in the whole set, especially for commons, right? The 2/1 that makes a 1/1 that you can sacrifice, the Incubator Drone. But my ramp curve stopped at 6. And what this is really, more than anything else, is a beatdown deck. This is a green-blue beatdown deck. I've got the Rot Shamblers, which usually grew. They're very powerful with the Eldrazi spawn. You can sacrifice them in response to, make them grow, or you can sacrifice to gain mana and they grow. The Korham Guide, which is a 2/1 for 2, which is fine. That's a good beatdown guy. He trades a lot. But more importantly, late in the game, you can pay 5, which came up quite a bit. My opponents had to prioritize killing these because I can get my bigger guys through. Now, my top end, I had a couple of okay 6-drops. Drowner of Hope was an all-star. He taps down guys. He's good on offense. He's good on defense. He makes multiple bodies. The Deathless Behemoth comes back if you need to. I didn't actually get to pull him back by sacrificing 2 things, but just having that ability was powerful. And him having Vigilance, he's I think the best 6-costed one that's not a rare. The Oran Reef Hydro is fine, although not particularly impressive, just being a 5/5 trample and then maybe 6 or 7 and growing. That's solid, but the thing about it is just being big isn't that impressive because Brad could play another bigger thing the next turn. He could play a 10/8, and then my 7/7's not getting there.
Mm-hmm.
But this has a nice beatdown curve. Having 3 of the Brood Hunter Worm was nice. A lot of times the 4th turn 4/3 into a 5th turn 4/3 is that's a lot of pressure. A lot of the smaller creatures have abilities. They make multiple creatures. They do other things. Staring down a 4/3 is going to trade fairly well. It's going to put a lot of pressure on. Having a good curve, I've got 4 2-drops, 3 3-drops, 4 4-drops, and I've got my 5-drops. Now, I didn't have any especially impressive Awaken cards. I did have the Rush of Ice, which I put in a 5-drop spell. I did occasionally cast it for 1 to get in damage, but most of the time it's tapping down a guy and building another body. You should put your Awaken cards with the mode you're going to use more often.
Which for me was always to awaken them.
Well, the exception to that is sheer drop, right? The 2 and a white, destroy target tap creature.
Oh, yeah. I would be fine with that spell, but I didn't have any, so...
Right. But that spell, when you're building your deck, you should put it in the 3-drop, because what are you more likely to do? Awaken it, or just cast it when it's available?
That's true. But whereas the Rush of Ice and the other one that bounces a creature, I played at 5 every time.
Yeah, and I would list both of those under 5, especially Rush of Ice, because this effect's not very powerful. The bouncing one, I would list under 5 usually, but you're more likely to bounce just a creature. There's not a lot of enchantments played, so it's a little bit weaker, but the upside to it is often you'll sacrifice Eldrazi Spawn to get out an early creature, and being able to bounce that counts for quite a bit of tempo and actual card advantage in that situation. I had some really good 5s. Rush of Ice was the worst. Kozilek's Chandler was solid in my deck. People felt like they needed to kill it. It did let me get out my other stuff sooner. but I didn't have too many terribly giant creatures to go from 5 to 7 with, so it was mostly a 4/4 that occasionally ramped me.
I found that playing it on 5 and just swinging with it on turn 6 was fun.
Yep, and that goes back to how nice Brood Hunter Worm is a whole extra turn before you're playing your 4/3, and that's a lot of damage to get past. Blight Herder was good. I do have a complaint about cards like Blight Herder. Let's see if we can get this to focus. We probably can't. But the thing about it is it's a processor, and it is 5 for a 4/5, which is fine. But you have to process 2 cards, and the reason I don't like that is more of a mechanical thing than anything else. Having to process some cards 1 and some cards 2 leads to confusing states. The first time I cast that, I accidentally sort of cheated. I didn't realize it until after the game that processed 2 things. Now, my opponent had multiple things in exile, so it wasn't like,
Was it like
terrible.
you couldn't have cast it, you just didn't do it
I didn't
correctly?
realize it because I thought all of the processors processed at 1 because there's no indication how many it does.
Yeah, it's not process 2 or anything like that, like a
Right.
keyword.
They didn't keyword it, so it's a little bit vague. So make sure you're reading the cards. Make sure when you're evaluating your picks, it is much harder to get 2 cards in exile than 1, especially if you don't have a lot of exile mechanics. I think I had 2 or 3. I have like Ruination Guide has Ingest, Unnatural Aggression, Exiles. So I had a couple of ways to do it, but not enough that I would actually run Blight Herder as anything other than a 4/5 for 5, which is fine.
I
But
had kind of the same complaint with regard to looking at the top number of cards. There's a blue spell or green spell that you look at the top 4.
Yep.
And then there's a green land that you look at the top 5.
Yeah. And I want to point something about that land. It's the Enter the Battlefield tap land. It says you look at the top 5 cards, and you may reveal a basic land and put it on top, put the rest on the bottom. You can play that land and then choose to put them all on the bottom and not reveal any lands on it. So that is a May ability. I saw somebody lose a game because they needed to draw anything other than a land, and they played that land and then put a land on top instead of choosing to not put anything on top.
Yeah.
And put them all on the bottom. But the all-creature curve was nice. I have a couple of spells over here. Tightening Coils is actually very bad in a beatdown-oriented deck. Giving something -6 power and attacking into like a 5 toughness or 6 toughness Eldrazi really just means your guys don't die. It doesn't actually take a lot of the... it's not good for aggressive decks. It's fine to play. I had to play them.
Whereas in my deck, it was great.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any low drops.
Yep, and it's the exact opposite. Where me and Brad both played blue-green, but we played very different decks. He just wanted to get to the point where his guys were giant.
Uh-huh.
I did run a Seek the Wilds main board, but in my sideboard I had a lot of options. I'm going to pull out the main ones I went with. I actually had quite a bit of sideboard options, but I ended up running... where is it at? A lot of game 2s and 3s. I ended up running the 3/5 for 5 that has Devoid, and you can process a card. And it wasn't for processing the card as much as there were games where I didn't necessarily need to be spending my second turn seeking the wilds. I needed more big creatures in some matches, like in mirror matches, where people had a lot of incubator drones and that kind of cards. You need more tempo, you need more speed, you need more big threats. You can't just wait around to try to get your proper threats or whatever. I had other sideboard cards. I chose not to play the big processor because having that capped at 6 made things a lot easier, having the lower curve without many enablers. Didn't go with Titan's Presence just because I didn't have that many big cards to get rid of with it. I only have a few colorless cards. I think I had 5 or 6, but only 3 of them or 4 of them were 4 or more power, and that's really where you're getting the payoff at. I didn't go into my black or red splashes, but I actually had a very nice black and red that I could have considered. The reason I chose the blue-green was because the curve was so smooth. There was a red option, but it was slightly less aggressive and more powerful. But that more aggressive consistency is nice, especially when you know your opponent's going to be playing big stuff. Like if I'm facing down Brad's deck, if I can beat him before he gets his stuff out, I'm great. But once he starts getting his stuff out, I'm very unlikely to be able to win. Something like an Ulamog will just shut down all of your stuff. But even then, just any 10-8 is going to start eating your guys. Mortuary Mire is the black land that comes into play tapped. And I think it's the most powerful of all of them. I think it's the black one and then the green one. The green one lets you fix your mana. You can keep a 1 or 2 land hand or a hand that has 1 less land than you'd like because it's essentially getting you a second land. But the Mortuary Mire lets you take a card from your graveyard and put it on top of your library. So you can choose the creature you want. Now, it's a May ability, so you don't have to. So if you only have creatures you'd rather not draw, you don't necessarily have to do that. But getting back a 4/3 or getting back an Eldrazi or getting back whatever you need is a powerful card. I actually had 3 of them, but I never found the match where it was right to pull them in. I didn't face against any heavy disruption decks.
I'm looking forward to playing that one in EDH, too.
Yeah, it'll be great there. It'll be good in a lot of places. It may end up seeing 1 or 2 of in some constructed lists out of the sideboard, or maybe even 1 or 2 in the main board, just because it's a utility land. I had 3 Bone Splinters. This card was great. Because I was running the shell I was running, and because I really didn't have that much fixing other than the Evolving Wilds and the Lifespring Druid, I was doing more of the beatdown. But getting rid of your small creatures, or even better, your Eldrazi Scions, to kill one of their big creatures is a big threat. If I faced a deck like Brad's that had better ramp, and I was worried about his big stuff, I would have brought this in. Instead of trying to out-tempo him and kill him before he could get him down, just answer his big things. Because, I mean, somebody played 3 Bone Splinters against you, Brad. How many?
Not going to win that one.
He only has 3 or 4
Unless
threats.
you waste the first couple on small creatures.
Right. And, I mean, the other downside is Brad had more than 3 big threats. But
drawing them all.
Yeah, drawing them all is terrible. So he would run 4 tops. Even if he had the best version, he only really wants to hit 2 in the whole game.
Yeah, I want to end you with 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. I did have the X Eldrazi, so that was a pretty cool card. I think I played it for 4 one time, 10 another time. I think I played it for 6.
Yeah, and
so it was pretty versatile.
Endless One was a really good one, just because you can put it anywhere. If you need a 2 or a 3, if you need a 3/3, right? If I went turn 4 Brood Hunter Worm and then Brad didn't have anything else to play, 4/4 Endless One's great, or 3/3 Endless One if you need to stop the beatdown. I had a Myers Malice. I didn't play this card, but it's a card that I'm pretty impressed with. People kind of look down at it first because paying 4 to have discard 2 is unimpressive. But the fact that you can
Awaken it later in the game?
awaken it later in the game when it's less relevant, and also people have cards in their hand longer, right?
Yeah, because of Eldrazi.
Because there's more big spells.
And this one is 6 to awaken?
6 to awaken for a 3/3, which is not impressive, but the fact that both of those modes will often be relevant. Like, your worst case scenario is a really overcosted creature. Not great. But your usual case scenario is making them discard the 2 most important cards in their hand.
Yep.
And then there's the best case scenario, of course, which is they discard 2 cards and you get a 3/3.
And I also noticed that with that spell, like, a lot of times you might sandbag lands, but in this format you play them as fast as you can get them so that you can get those Eldrazi down on time.
That is correct. No, I didn't have to do that. When I hit 6 mana, I usually save mine for the Hydra with the landfall, but that was the only
I
thing
had
I
one
had
of
going
those
for.
too. That was pretty good.
Yeah. And I was actually sometimes working my way towards 10 mana in some situations just to double activate Coral Guide. I had other good black cards. The Death Touch Bat with flying. Silent Skimmer was a card that I underrated. Brad was on point. This card was great. It was great at attacking. It was great defensively.
Yeah, it was hard to kill, and on top of that, most flyers can't kill it.
Yeah. Very rarely
On
with
the
this.
attack,
Yep.
so.
The only time that I saw one of these not impressively perform is when I was on the beatdown and my opponent played one of these. Brood Hunter Worm eats through them. But I think that's one of the only cards that's on the curve that's going to kind of beat it down. And then Dutiful Return's a fine card to play. Again, black was a very grindy color for me. If I needed to go into more of a grindy mode, playing probably green-black or blue-black to grind it out. I didn't really have any other green cards that were exciting. Earthen Arms, Reclaiming Vines is okay. I considered Blister Pod. I didn't have the build for it. Blister Pod can go into one of the sacrifice-oriented decks. I actually think it's better in Constructed than it is here, just because you can take advantage of the synergies a little better. I saw some good use for Natural Connection. A couple people were playing like green-red, sort of a ramp deck, but also had some landfall creatures. That made a big difference. It's the one that puts a land into play.
Oh, I
instant speed.
played 2 of those, in my Crappy Wrap deck.
They're bad ramp, and
Really
they're bad
bad.
landfall enablers, but the fact that they do both makes a big difference.
Sneaky Landfall was pretty fun.
Yeah, and then I had some of the... I could have gone deeper in Ingest. I felt like Ingest is not a good sealed mechanic unless you get real lucky. I played someone all in Ingest, and it just wasn't great.
I had a ton of processor cards, but no ingest cards, so I didn't get to even try it out.
The people I saw playing it, it was not... the payoff wasn't there. There wasn't Ingest cards that were really paying you off well enough, and having to run 1-2 flyers to do just some okay Ingest stuff wasn't there. I think in Constructed a little bit better, where you get an easier selection of the processor cards, because you're going to take processor cards lower because it's a little tough. Like the double and process cards are just not really playable unless you
Or
really
taking
do it.
a lot of ingest, yeah.
Anticipate's a fine card, but again, this deck is fairly streamlined. I don't have a slot that's a good flex slot. In fact, talking about Anticipate, this is the kind of card that you'll be happy to have in your deck, but it's also a great first cut because it's just card selection. Sometimes you need a specific card, Anticipate's great. But if you notice your deck needs a cut, looking to Anticipate, if you have other early plays, is a great card to cut because of that.
Yep. I ended up cutting it in my deck.
Yeah, because, I mean, he had other plays. I think you cut it for a creature, right?
Yeah, I think it was more low-end creatures. In fact, it might have been the one that lets you not be able to block.
I think yours was the one that that had the 8 mana cost and grew bigger.
Oh, that one ended up being a lot more impressive than I thought it would.
Yeah, it just is a 2/2 to survive.
Yeah, 2/2 and then pay 8 and it becomes a 7/7.
So speaking of cards that overperformed that we underrated, Sledge Crawler, the kind of overpriced shade ability growing, is usually underwhelming. That would normally be the case, but there was so much mana going around, especially in sealed. This card way overperformed. Whenever I saw it on my opponent's side of the board and they blocked early on it, I was excited about that block. So I'm not sure if it's going to be quite as good in draft because it'll be a little bit quicker of a format. But the thing to know here is that cards that are very slow oriented, like Sledge Crawler, are performing very well. This is a very slow format. It was, I think, one of the reasons that I did as well as I want. I went 3-1-1 and then placed 9th, and 8th was the top. It was a top 8, so it was kind of sad. But
oh yeah,
it was because I had a good beatdown curve. A lot of people weren't ready for a beatdown curve. Another guy that performed fairly well was the Zulaport Cutthroat. I saw a lot of people draining for quite a bit. You needed to kill him. It can buy you the time, the life. In the black sacrifice-based decks, even in like a black Eldrazi, like let's say you're playing black-green Eldrazi, the fact that you're sacrificing your guys to build mana is getting you more life. The losing the life is not as relevant in a lot of times. In the ally deck, that's where that part comes in. But the gaining life buys you time, even outside of the life gain synergies. Card that underperformed that I thought was going to be better wasn't. Voracious Null, just the fact that it's sorcery speed just means it's not as good as you'd hoped. You can use it. It is fine if you have a lot of Eldrazi spawn that you don't have anything to do with. But I didn't feel like it shined a lot. I had strong white cards, but not enough to build a deck. And to give you guys an example of that, I had 3 excellent removal spells in white. I had Gideon's Approach. That's an excellent white removal spell. The Wrath, excellent white removal spell. And the Stasis Snare. These are 3 of the best white removal spells. The problem is, the rest of my cards
to go with it.
are just combat tricks I can't play, small guides I don't want to play by themselves, so there wasn't a deck with it. And the double white cost really was prohibitive. I couldn't splash for it. If these were both single white cards, you guys would probably be seeing a Bant deck. I'd probably have green and white and blue with some nice high-end removal, but that just wasn't a feasible or correct choice. The last thing I could have done that I chose not to do was play red. I had good red, but as you guys are going to see, I had the Limiting Size Spears, which helps you get damage to +1/+1 first strike. Stone Fury, excellent removal. Akum Hellkite, it's better than Oran Reef Hydra. Dealing damage is better than growing most of the time. It gets to keep things off the board. There's usually targets. Killing Eldrazi Science is usually worth it just to keep people off mana. The Vestige is a good offensive and defensive card. 4 for a 3/4. Trample is fine. The Devoid can often help. The Vile Aggregate, this card usually is 2 or 3 powered, but it can get larger. And the very worst, it's a 1/5 for 3. But a lot of these cards aren't as aggressive as like the Predator is. And I was close to playing it because of how many cards I had in it. But the green and the blue were both just a little bit stronger. Like, I don't think that the Sentinels are a great aggressive cards. They're usually 1/4, sometimes 2/4. But I think I'd rather have a Rot Shambler or a Coral Helm Guide than either of those. And then I had the Stonewaker and the Slide Runner, which are also good aggressive cards. I don't think that there was enough aggression and Outnumber, which was an excellent removal spell. But there wasn't enough middle cards to go with that. There was only 2 3-drops and 1 4-drop, and then everything else was a little bit bigger, as opposed to a really even curve with a slightly less high power. And often in sealed pools, if you don't have the nuts, then picking something like this is a safer route to go, taking advantage of your opponent stumbling. Right? Best case scenario, Brad's deck always beats mine. He plays Eldrazi, he wins. But the average case scenario is he just
I don't draw any, or I don't get to ramp.
right. He ramps out to 5, and he needs 7. Well, that's not going to get you there, right?
Yep.
Ideally, this deck would have one more answer, so I could answer one of his threats, right? If the Rush of Ice was the bounce guy or something like that. I'd probably say the actual best 2 cards in the deck, the Wind Rider Patrol. This card didn't get in too many times, but if it ever got in, I basically just won the game. Scrying 2 on a 4/3 flyer for 5 is awesome. You can't really ignore it. It can often be the card that races other Eldrazi, right? So Brad plays his turn 6 Eldrazi, and I attack with my 4/3, and then he attacks back, and I attack with my 4/3. Well, that's 8. I mean, often you don't have enough time. You have to answer something like a 4/3 flyer, as opposed to a Kozilek's Channeler, which is a great card. You know, it has a lot more upside in a lot more other decks, but it doesn't get through, right? His 8/9 that he plays is going to stall it out. You just can't get through that last bit of damage. For that same reason, Drowner of Hope was nice, right? I had opponents play big stuff, and being able to tap down 2 or 3 of them just by sacrificing some Eldrazi was very powerful. The last card I want to talk about is Deathless Behemoth. A lot of people were incredulous that this card had Vigilance because it does work. This is the kind of card you can ramp out to, and it's going to play offense and defense. There are bigger Eldrazi, but there are very few that do as well when you need to race, because it keeps back your opponent's ground stuff while letting you keep damaging. And that's important because, I mean, Brad, were you ever in situations where you had your big guys down, but if you swung, you would have lost?
No, they were all cut and dried, but I could see that happening.
Okay, yeah. You can be in that spot, right? Where you're like, I got him down, and you're looking at that 2/1 flyer, and you're like, well, I can swing, but if I swing, he's just going to block it a couple times, and I'm going to lose the race. Or I can swing, but the crackback will kill me, even if he doesn't have blockers.
Mm-hmm.
And
that guy really breaks those stalls, though. I had one in my pool.
Yeah. The last card that I wanted to talk about a lot, that I felt was really good, was the Coral Helm Guide. And I think this guy goes in just about any deck. In the ally deck, you're happy to have him because he's a 2/1 ally. In the aggressive decks, you're fine there too. In the Eldrazi deck, he's a good blocker early, but that target creature can be unblocked or can't be blocked. That unblockable feature means that he's a threat in any deck. In the small decks, you're pushing through that last little bit of damage with an aggressive creature. In your Eldrazi decks, you have an early blocker that turns your late game Eldrazi's from getting chump blocked into getting the win. So I was happy with that overall. I had a couple of lands.
Definitely had fun with that card.
Yeah. Lumbering Falls, in some ways, underperformed in that this card would normally be better, but the fact that your opponent has so many big creatures and a 3/3 means so much less than normal meant that he didn't do as much as I'd hoped. The Hexproof was fine. There's not that many tricks to remove cards, but there's a couple. And there were times where, I had him awakened and I could activate his, so he was like a 6/6. I could activate his ability in response to counter removal, which was nice. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't pick these highly. It's a free slot. My land is a threat, which is just an extra free threat, which was a big deal. So I wouldn't say that you can count these to win you the game, but they are an extra free creature in your land slots. Evolving Wilds was awesome. This is a card that you're going to have to pick up kind of early. I think a lot of 3-color or tuna splash things will exist. Converge pushes you that way, but also there's things like Bone Splinters you might want to splash black for. There's a couple blue cards, cards like red, cards like Outnumber. There's a lot of removal that costs just one of its color, so that's when Evolving Wilds goes up. And there's also Landfall as well. And being able to double Landfall can create some powerful situations. With that, Blighted Woodfall also fills in that same void. In this deck, it wasn't shining as much because you have to pay 5, which, can let me get to my early 6 drops. But in a deck like Brad's, where if
would have been great.
Yeah, because it's a free ramp spell in his deck. Often the tapping for a colorless isn't a big deal. And when he needs to go from 5 to 7, or 5 to 6, because you get the 2 lands and you sacrifice his land. But he can fix 2 of the colors. Let's say Brad was playing a Converge card. He could Converge with it. And it does push him 1 mana closer. Another land I saw that I didn't have was the Spawning Bed. It was 6 to make 3 1/1s.
I played against somebody who had 2 of those.
It creates a small offensive force, not great, but it can help you widen your board out enough if you're playing a lot of Eldrazi spawn and small guys to get through damage. It can block, and it does take you from your 7 mana, and then you lose 1, so you go 7 to 6, but then you have the 3 to sacrifice, so you can turn your 7 mana into 9, or 10 if you hit a land drop with it. So there's a lot of cool things about that. How did you feel overall about how Wizards handled the thing? Like me and Brad were
Did the
talking.
pre-release packs, you mean?
Yeah. How did you feel about the pre-release specs and the
So
content?
I found it weird that they gave dice from the previous set in them. They gave Origins dice in most of them.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, almost everybody I talked to had gotten an Origins dice. Only a few people had gotten a Zendikar dice.
Wow, that must be some sort of error on their part.
I really don't know if that was intentional or an error. Let's see, what else was there? There was... oh, look, there we are. Let's see, what else was there?
There was the...
Oh, the divider card. I liked that.
Right, it's a cheap...
It's a little plastic card.
It's cardboard, actually.
What? It's cardboard?
Yeah. But...
Oh, it certainly is.
Sure, but and it's thematic, all that. But the thing about it was, I used this card to divide my sideboard. And,
That is true.
And it was nice. That's what I wanted to do. I don't want to have all these cards mashed together. That made it easy. And this is little things like this that make your play experience slightly better, slightly smoother. How did you feel about the promo cards being some random rare?
Being anything in the set, right? Any rare or mythic in the set.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was funny because I know some people who will collect all those cards. And so now they get to collect one card of every set with the pre-release date on it.
So the plus side is, for collectors, they have more cool cards to collect.
However, they don't have alternate art like they used to.
Because they can't do an alternate art for everyone.
They could. They're not going to.
That would be insane.
Now that would make it worth it. I think
That-
what they did in this scenario is half-assed.
The other thing I don't like about it is, in my opinion, pre-releases are for casual play. You don't expect everyone to be great. A lot of new players come out, or people that just come out for pre-release. A lot of people come to the pre-release, take their cards
Like
home.
Daniel.
And, I mean, they'll play in their EDH decks, their casual decks. Like
They'll play online. Like Daniel.
I play online. But you know what I'm saying? Like, pre-releases are for casual players, and having a seeded pack helps guide you that way. It makes that experience easier for them.
I think that's a lot better.
I do, too. And, I mean, like...
Though there is usually a best seeded pack, there is a best color to get. Or a best combination of colors. Whereas this way, it was pretty much completely random, which is good in some ways, but bad in the fact that they went half-assed on all the cards. All they have is the date on them. I don't care. Collectors probably won't care as much. They had the date on them, but they didn't have a theme like they did last time. I really liked the theme. Thought that was fun. I never did any of the objectives, but for Ravnica or
Did they have objectives on this one?
They didn't on this one, but they have on all the previous, which was fun for some people, not me.
All right, I think that they should have had the objectives for people that enjoy them, because it doesn't take anything away from else.
We'll have to come up with some, I guess.
The seeded packs having a best color is an issue. I wish that they made the rares a little bit. So if you look at the 5 different colors or pairs, whatever, you're gonna see color pairings or colors where there's a strongest common color. There's a deepest common color. And what they should do is just make the rare appropriate for whatever the color combination is, even if it's not necessarily as exciting. Let's say that blue is the best.
They kind of did that because they had a set number of rares that could come in each pack before.
Right.
So even for like Origins, there was all different colors, and then you could get a set of 5, 10 rares, I think it was.
Well,
7, I don't know.
I don't mean that part as much. The pre-release card. Most people chose their color based on the pre-release card, correct? For competitive players. Like, you chose the white one because the white pre-release card was better than the other 4 colors.
Oh, well, so in later sets, there were 5 or 6 pre-release cards for every color. In maybe not in Origins, but for all the rest of the sets previous, there was like a pre-release pack, and it came with one random rare that you didn't know, and then a bunch of cards that fit the theme of those 2 colors.
Okay, I was thinking...
So there was like 40 of them, I think, for the previous few sets.
No, but the other ones had... You had the set pack with the set amount of rares and all the colors that were coming in, but you also had the pre-release promo that had the date on the alternate art, and that was one specific card.
No, it wasn't one specific card. It was a
5
number.
different.
It was 5 or so different ones.
Right, but I thought there was one for each color.
No. There were like 5 for each pack you could get.
And they all had alternate art?
Yeah.
Oh.
There were about 40 alternate art cards for several sets in a row.
Okay.
And those were a pain for the people who collected them to collect, but they were unique.
Okay.
Whereas, I think with Origins there were less, maybe? I'm not sure.
So, that does alleviate it some too.
Yeah, see, I thought that was the best way to do it. I
Right.
thought they would not go back once they did that.
I like that method. I also don't mind if they have the one for each color, but then let's say that white is the best color for commons and uncommons, so it's likely to be the best seed pool. You make it the worst rare because you're likely to have the best pool. And I'm not like
I don't think they should do that because a lot of the times for the press several sets, the rares have been so much more powerful than all the commons and uncommons that then you would hopefully just get the best rare and get it every game. But you would lose a lot of games where you're powerful synergistic cards because they drop the one card. Seems like Hearthstone if you do it that way.
I will say the thing I liked about the rares in this set is the ones that are overpowering are costed appropriately. I mean, Ulamog will probably win you the game if you cast them. But then again, you have to pay 10. Like, that's a fair price. There's no 4 or 5 or 3 mana rare that's going to win you the game.
I did actually cast Ulamog and then not win the game.
Well, yeah, that'll happen every once in a while.
That was fun.
But, I mean, like...
He got countered.
Yeah, and there'll be situations where even if he doesn't get countered, your opponent has enough pressure on the board that you'll die, whatever.
Yeah. It didn't happen often.
No, but the fact that, like... Did you see any 4 mana rares? You're like, oh, they cast the 4 mana rare. You're going to lose the game.
I don't know that there were any 4 mana rares.
I think the closest one, as far as to like warping the game that you can cast early, is like Not From This World, and that's not going to necessarily win you the game as much as just buy you time. So
yeah, I don't think there were any 4 mana spells that won people the game. That 6 mana one that lets you tap down their creature by sacking Eldrazi spawns.
Yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah, that won a lot of people a lot of games.
Yeah, it was really good. I don't think it was necessarily like ridiculously overpowered, but it was strong.
I saw it turn around entire games.
Yeah. So we are going to...
No, we're done.
We're done?
Yeah, we're done. That was long enough.
All right.
Done. Daniel's just going to talk for 30 more minutes about cards he's already reviewed. I'm not going to let it happen.
All right. Well, I want to look and see if we had any cheap rares that win you the game that don't have a cost.
Maybe Gideon. The best
sure.
rare set.
You know. I don't mind mythics winning the game on their own necessarily, because they're mythics. How many times do you see mythics in a draft or set? Like, not that often.
I mean, not that often, but those people do generally win a lot.
Yeah. If you open a Gideon, you're at a much higher percent to win if you're playing your Gideon. But
yeah, I'd much rather them do that than not put super powerful cards in Magic.
And you've seen in past sets where there have been cards that are mythics that aren't... You see mythics... And you're like, that card doesn't seem that mythic. Like, Undergrowth Champion's a great idea, right? It's 1 green for the guy that grows. He's right there. Oh, here we go. That works too. Undergrowth Champion is a mythic. If it was a rare, it would usually win you the game if you cast it. It's a really hard card to play against in Limited. And it comes down turn 3, and it's super powerful. But it's a mythic. How often are you going to see it, right?
Yeah, not too often.
Are any of these rares like costed 4 or less? I think Guardian of Tazim's close.
I mean, this one, but it probably won't win you.
Well, it's a mythic.
Oh, it's a mythic?
It's a mythic. I'm looking for a rare that costs 4 or less that's going to kill you.
There aren't any that are just going to kill you.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good...
I mean, that's good set design, though.
Yeah, that's what I like to see. I like to know that, any one card that costs 4 or less that's a rare isn't just going to win the game, that can't be removed. There's a couple of really good, efficient creatures in green.
See, I made him not talk about the whole set.
Yeah, this wasn't going to talk about it anyway. But
yeah, I don't see any that would just utterly win you the game for less than 4 mana. There's some that you could definitely set up to win easier, though.
Yeah. There's
most of them are.
There's the green guy, the Woodland Wanderer right there, the 2/2 with Converge. You can have a 6 mana guy on turn 4 if you have 5 colors or 4 colors, whatever. Mm-hmm. But none of the cards are like, you remember Fate Reforged? They had, what was it? The white was 2 white, and your creature gets a 1/1 counter every turn. 2 1/1 counters every turn, or tap one of your guys' opponent's cards. See, Citadel Siege. Citadel Siege is not a fun card. It is a common. They're not common. It's a rare, so you're going to see it fairly often.
Oh yeah, that one. That siege was unstoppable.
Right, and like,
but it was 4. Right.
That's
what we were talking about. It was 4.
It's an enchantment, so you can't kill it.
Very hard to kill.
Right, game 1, you're just like, oh well, I don't main deck enchantment hate. I guess I have to lose the game.
Yeah, there was very little coming back from that one.
And there were a couple other cards like that in Fate Reforged. I think there was a common complaint about Fate Reforged is that the rares were so much
more powerful. And I noticed in this set they were more powerful, but they weren't so much more powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you had some really good uncommons in your pool that would have definitely beaten most of the rares that people could have played.
Yeah. And
like, I would have been sad to see this Outcast right here.
Sure.
Had I been playing. There's no way. I don't know if he would have made the deck. I mean, it probably would have worked out, but you would have had to, like, Turn 1, I'm not playing him.
No.
Turn 6?
Yeah, that's when you play him. You play
I
him
might play him.
You play him on turn 5.
Turn 5, I might play him.
Yeah, you play him turn 6.
But I'm definitely not playing him on turn 4 unless I've been ramping.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this Dranomite would have won you the game.
But again, those are both mythics,
Yeah, those
and that's
are mythics.
fine.
Like, I would have not liked to have seen a lot of these cards because they're not as powerful as some of the uncommons.
Yeah, and I mean, the Eldrazi lets you do that too. Paying more for powerful uncommons. I mean, a lot of these mythics and rares just lose to, Brad's 8 mana, big guy. Like,
Common, yeah.
Nothing special, or in some uncommons. So they got to push it that way a little bit more. I hope this trend continues in the next pre-release. I plan to go to it. This set was fun to play. I was sad that I had an option to play red or black as another color. It didn't work out. But I didn't have an option to play a different kind of deck. I don't think Allies is playable for most people.
Not in sealed.
Not in Sealed.
In draft, you probably could draft.
Oh, yeah. In draft,
In fact, I would love to try, but MTGO releases much later.
it is next week, I think.
So,
But like Allies and Ingest were 2 decks that I saw at the pre-release, and they just didn't look to get there in Sealed. You have beatdown decks, you have control decks, and you have ramp decks, which is fine. But in draft, I think you have a couple more decks, which is normal, right? Some of these other build-around cards, too. It's just there weren't that many different decks. Like, you looked at your sealed pool and you could tell what deck you were supposed to be in. Even if it was something unexciting like the beatdown deck.
which is basically what I was in the ramp deck, and he was in the beatdown deck, and
the deck
that's what we had to play.
And sometimes, like in sealed, like I think the guy that went first had a control ramp deck that had just a lot of really good threats. He was playing Grixis, splashing for red, and he was just playing a bunch of cards that controlled the board, and he could beat you down to death, but if he didn't, he played into a bunch of Eldrazi, and it was really cool.
Was it the same guy that won 2 days in a row?
Yeah, but you got to be you've got to be pretty lucky. Like, he had a really good sealed pool, right?
Plus. Anyway, that's it for today.